So guys, let's continue here with our series on how to use the MACD. And the MACD is a very interesting tool because of course it tracks the moving averages, but based on most of the information that you're going to find on textbooks and information that you're going to find all over the web, it seems like the MACD should only be used whenever you have a crossover. It seems very simple enough, but it's a little bit more trickier than that. What I want to discuss in this video here, as we have tried to break down the MACD into various aspects of it, so that eventually after you've watched this series of videos you can understand how to use the MACD. Of course, it's not going to take one video, it's going to take a couple of videos to actually bring home the understanding of how to trade this instrument. Now, a lot of you know that the MACD is used mainly for the crossovers. That's very easy, everybody knows that. So you want to wait for the crossover. That seems very simple enough, but I think we need to go to the next level of understanding, which is instead of just finding a crossover on the MACD to say it's a buy, I want you to understand that it is slightly more complicated than that. And this is how I can summarize it for you. A crossover is more meaningful when it is above the zero line of the MACD. So if you have a crossover and the MACD lines are trading above zero, that is more reliable of a signal as opposed to a crossover that could take place, for example, when the MACDs are trading below the zero line. And of course, there's zero line is this line that I'm drawing here. So we're going to learn in this example that the crossovers that are more reliable and the ones that people should pay attention to are the ones above the MACD line of zero, and don't give too much weight to the crossover if it is trading below zero, because those ones are not as powerful. Now there's one exception, and it's a very interesting exception. The most reliable crossover when the MACDs are trading below zero is when they happen after a trend break has taken place. Let me explain that a little bit. So let's say you find two MACD crossovers. Here's one crossover and another crossover. You draw a straight line. So now you have this established line, which is a green line here. Once this is broken, once the MACD breaks that trend, so the stock is selling off, once this breaks here, what happens is that after this break of a trend, the next MACD setting is usually very powerful. So while it's below zero, understand that if it is a MACD crossover that is coming after a trend break, it is more reliable. I know this does not make sense until you see the example I'm about to show you. So let's take a look at now what I've done, I've just taken the same chart and flipped it around so you can understand that this happens also when stocks are moving higher. So let's say you have a stock that is moving higher in price. Okay, stock's moving higher. Now you're trying to find a way to short the stock. It is the same principles work here. If you find a crossover when the MACDs are above zero, it's not reliable. I know this, I'm going to show you examples. And a crossover when the MACD is above zero is not a good sell signal, is not a good short signal. Now, generically speaking, whenever you have a crossover of the MACD, which is a bearish signal, and the MACD is already trading below zero, then you can consider that a sell signal or a short signal. On the other hand, remember, let's say we have two established MACD crossover points. We draw a straight line. So once this line is breached to the upside here, the next crossover here, which is outside this range, so there was a line here established, the MACD did not cross over here, it broke outside that trend, and this crossover is more reliable because it is outside the trend. These ones were not reliable crossovers. This one is a reliable crossover and is probably a better sell signal if you use other indicators in conjunction with this. So we are going to go to the live example so I can show you what I'm talking about. Now in this example, we are taking a look at the 60-minute chart for the S&P 500. Now remember, this is useful in any time period, be it on the hourly, on the daily charts, weekly charts, or monthly charts. I'm just using this as an example, an illustration, but it works in any time frame. The thing is, once you figure out and you understand the concept of how to use the MACD, then it makes more sense on any time frame. So what I'm gonna have here, I have two MACD settings, and you'll find this on most of my charts, but you can use one MACD setting. I use two just because that's what I've used, and we can go into the details of why I use those two in another video. But I use the 583 setting, and I also use the 13-21-8 setting, or you can use the default MACD setting of, I believe is 12-20, whatever it is. The default MACD setting can also be used for this. The thing we are trying to learn here is how to use the MACD crossovers to better give you better signals. In this particular example, let's take a look at these crossovers here. Let's take a look at that crossover and that crossover. Notice, even though it's a crossover, the first signal came here while the second signal came here. So not a good signal in terms of entry, and we're not considering that there's negative divergence. Of course, we know about the negative divergence, lower prices and a higher MACD crossover. That's negative divergence, everybody knows that, and that's a good entry point there. So no, that's not the purpose of this video. What I'm trying to show you is that when the MACD crossover takes place below the zero line, and the zero line is this right here, that zero line, okay, zero right there. So that level is what I'm talking about. The crossovers are not as reliable when they're below zero if you are looking for entry points to the upside. Now you'll notice that, let's take a look at this crossovers. This crossover here, which is this low, happened just at zero, which is reliable, and you saw the stock move higher. There's another crossover here, which again was reliable because it was above zero. Another crossover here almost went below zero, okay, but that was at entry there. Another crossover below zero there, which was this entry point, and you can see in each instant the stock moved higher. So now we were talking about range. So let's take a look at this sell signal. Remember, nothing in the market is perfect. These are just examples trying to show you how we can best use the MACD. So if we draw this trend, there's a trend here, these 3 points. All right, so there was a crossover here. If you want to short the stock and it is crossing over above 50 or above zero on the MACD, not reliable. Crossover, you're trying to short the stock or the market and the crossover is above zero, not reliable. Remember, that's what we are learning here, because you can see the prices went higher. Crossover here, not reliable. Why? Because prices are moving still higher. A crossover above zero is not reliable. But notice one thing now. Remember, I talked about that once you've established a trend, so there were crossovers here, you draw a straight line. The next crossover, even though it's above zero, is more reliable because the instrument came out of the range and crossed over. So that crossover is what I was telling you becomes more reliable. So that was a sell point there. So that's a very good example. I want to show you another example of the crossover outside a trend. Take a look at this very nice low here, very nice low, and the stock S&P 500 would really spike after this low here. So this was a nice entry point. I want to show you how, if you take the crossover here, this crossover here, and this crossover here, draw a straight line, and actually even this crossover here, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4 crossovers. None of them was very successful, okay, but this here was successful. Why? Because the crossover broke the trend. It broke below this established line here, broke below this line, and so now we are learning here that the crossover that comes after that break of that trend, is more reliable, and that's why this was a very nice, interesting low and crossover. So the MACD here could have given you a nice entry point there, which would have been a very perfect timing as far as the entry into the S&P 500 is concerned. So let's take a look at another one here. So while this was taking place, so while finding this low here, take a look at the other MACD setting. We have a crossover low there, and another low here, and another low here, this general area. So there's a line here. So you draw the line, which is this line here. So now once we broke down here, the next crossover below this trend, which is this crossover here, has to give you a more powerful buy signal by itself. So what I'm saying here is, if you want to use the MACD properly, is that crossovers below zero are not going to be very powerful, but they can be powerful if it comes after a trend break. And here was a trend break, and this crossover was very successful because it is same crossover here and a very nice entry there. So I hope this explains what I meant by saying that you want to wait for a trend break. In this particular example, there was a trend break there and an entry point and a trend break. So this crossovers here is more powerful, and this crossover here is more powerful. Now I must point out that even though I'm using an hourly chart here, this works in all time frames. So if it's a weekly chart, it's gonna give you an outlook for the stock or instrument weeks into the future. If it's an hourly chart, it's gonna give you the potential direction of the market or the stock hours into the future. If you're using a monthly chart, it's gonna give you an insight into the charts setting up either to move higher or lower for the next couple of months or weeks. So your time frame gives you the outlook. So this is an hourly chart. It's gonna give me an hour to hour, the next couple of days trading possibility. What I want to look at here is take a look at these crossovers as the stock. The S&P 500 SPY was moving higher here. Okay, take a look at the crossovers just above zero. Okay, that area crossover above zero is good. Take a look at that entry point. Take a look at that crossover here, which is this low here. There was a little move higher. Here it almost collapsed below zero, but would cross over just under zero and then move back above zero. The key here is anything above zero, a crossover above zero or just about zero is a good signal. Okay, also take a look at this. I was gonna show you the other crossover here on the other MACD time frame. Take a look at this crossover here, which happens to be this entry point there at about 1700, and that crossover, even though it seemed like it was negative, but because it was crossing over, it was above zero. 1700 would be this entry point here, and you see you rode the stock for the next couple of days. So if it's a daily chart, you're going to ride it for the next couple of days. If it's a weekly chart, it's going to be good for a couple of weeks. If it's a monthly chart, it's going to be good for a couple of months. The same MACD understanding. But what I want to look at here is, let's take a look at, let's say you want to take a read of this market right now. And, I don't know where this market is going to go, but let's use this MACD just to have an idea of how you could use the MACD setting right now. If you take a look at price, you'll see that if you take the lows there on an hourly closing basis, draw a straight line, there seems to be a trend here. So you can assume that if this market breaks down here, there could be sellers coming in the market. Also notice that on the RSI, even though this is a MACD educational video, if you take a look at the RSI, this gray line has been support ever since the market broke out above this level here. So it was support. That was a very good entry point here during this spike. Nice entry point. And so the market has stayed above the gray line, bounced off the gray line here, which was this nice entry point. Recently, over the last couple of hours, bounced off that level and now moving higher. So you see that for this market to go lower, it needs to break below that gray line and could also slash below 50. Slashing below 50 always brings an acceleration of the move. But what I want to do is let's take a look at the MACDs. So I'm watching this and I'm saying to myself, okay, there was almost a crossover here, which would have been positive for the S&P 500. Now, if this crossover fails and it moves below zero, that is a fresh momentum to the downside. Remember, the last time we had a move below zero was here, and this would be moving below zero here would be this time frame here. And you see the market had a move lower. So I'm watching this and I'm saying if the MACDs crack below zero here, that's not good for the market. And you'll notice right now we have a crossover on this MACD setting just below zero. Remember, crossover below zero is more reliable if you're looking for a sell signal. So if you want to sell the market, this crossover here, it's just beginning to take place. If this instrument rolls over there and it's going to be crossing over below zero, then that puts more downside pressure in the market. So this is how I use it to understand where momentum is going. Now, let me qualify that because this is an educational video. If we have a crossover here in the market, guess what? Because it's above zero, it's a more reliable signal to the upside and this market moves higher. Okay, so that's the thing I'm watching for. Is this going to be a crossover and a signal that the market continues moving higher, or is this market going to break this zero level and also fail to cross over here? If it failed to cross over, moving below zero, that's a negative signal. So I hope this video has been educational in the sense that you want to find stocks that are above or below zero on their MACD to give you a better signal of whether to go short or whether to go long a stock. And I hope that makes sense. Again, this is going to be a series of videos, so watch the whole series so you can build a better picture of how to use the MACD. Eric Moa, the good luck, peace, and blessings.